You can adjourn anytime you want. I'm just going to hang out until you kick me out of the building.
Did you bring a pillow to hide in the corner back?
I've just got a dark house with a dog that's stinky to go home to. So.
Pretty close. The Linn-Mar School Board special session will be called to order here at 5 p.m. in the boardroom of the Learning Resource Center. Will you please determine a quorum?
Buckles.
Here.
Eisenberg.
Here.
Lawson.
Here.
Maury.
Here.
Nelson.
Here.
Wall.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Quorum is present at 5 o'clock.
Make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Okay, we'll go right into the informal reports. First of all, cabinet update by Mr. Biscard.
Yep, cabinet update will be very much focused tonight on recovery from the storm from Monday. So try to give everybody a quick summary to kind of provide the context for the rest of our meeting and some decisions we're going to make. But first of all, I just want to offer my sincere thoughts to everyone that's dealing with this, whether it's personal damage or loss or in your work world or a combination of both. I know it's been excruciating for everybody. It's truly amazing this has impacted, but nobody's been exceptions to this. So it's crazy to think this is happening. So our thoughts go with everybody as we try to make the best of the situation. And I know it's been challenging and for everybody to try to deal with it, but then also how to move forward as well, and that's kind of why we're here tonight. So wish everybody the best on their road to recovery at home and at work, or personally too. So our update for our district, we have not been immune from this storm, obviously. All of our buildings have been impacted across the board. I sent the board an update on Friday, kind of where we stood with everything. All of our buildings have been damaged to some degree. It really focuses down to roof damage and then subsequent water damage because of it, and then tree damage are kind of the three main things we're seeing across the board, which is no surprise considering everything. Our buildings that are probably most impacted right now, Wilkins, Indian Creek, and the Aquatic Center probably got hit the worst overall, those three buildings. But like I said, it's not limited to those three areas, which makes the recovery part harder because our resources have to be spread more thin to try to address all the different challenges. So. The other piece of the district that's been hit pretty hard as well isn't one of our buildings, but our transportation department. About half of our fleet has been damaged at a pretty significant level. So that is a recovery piece that we're working through as well to make sure our buses and vans are operational and they're safe and they're ready to go for when school starts too. So that will take some time to get that done as well. As you're aware, cleanup and repair work has begun. This is going to be a long process, as everybody clearly knows that. And the assessment of the damage is still ongoing for us as well. The vastness of our damage has taken our insurance adjusters and architects and everybody else a lot of time to go through, and lack of power has hindered that process very much so. So what I shared with you Friday for an update, please keep in mind we do not have power back in several buildings. I think we're down to 3 right now that don't have power: Boulder Peak, Wilkins, and Lynn Grove, I believe. Is where we're at. We got some false power a little bit for a while earlier today, but we're back to those 3 buildings not having power. So that does impact our cleanup and our recovery for those buildings as well. With all that said, it could have been a lot worse for our schools. We did avoid, for the most part, having a building that was completely at a loss or structural damage of major significance too. So we feel fortunate that it wasn't worse than what it was, even though it's pretty significant at the same time. So. With all that going on, our construction projects that we had, we were in a pretty good spot a couple weeks, or a week and a half or so ago of where we stood. We have temporary occupancy at Boulder Peak and Hazel Point, and those projects have had some damage as well, kind of a step backwards for them to assess a few areas as well to continue that progress. But I feel like overall, it could have been worse for those construction areas. And then the three buildings that had work going on, Indian Creek, Bowman Woods, and Wilkins, those three construction projects that were happening, the damage of those buildings didn't really drastically impact the construction of those three buildings as much as we thought it might as well. So the damage that's at Indian Creek and Wilkins, I mentioned earlier, specifically is other parts of the building. So I'm not sure if that's better or worse, but it's a little bit different than having the construction piece taken care of. And then the last thing, if you haven't noticed yet, if you drive out by Echo Hill, Elburnett Road, that is now a four-way stop. So, which was initially one of the challenges we had to get our buildings open to make that a safe intersection. That's now a four-way stop, but just be careful as you're driving through that area. That's a change. So, so there's kind of a quick overview of where we stand across the board. I'd say we feel pretty good about where we're at with everything in the first steps of recovery, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And honestly, until power comes back, we're going to be limited in what we can do in some of those areas still too. So that's kind of our quick rundown for our buildings overall. Any questions or comments or thoughts board members have? Things I've shared with you or talked about tonight?
I know you won't have an answer to this, but the part of Wilkins that was damaged most severely is the storm shelter area. So I would like to hear thoughts in the future of those where all the kids are going to gather, and that's where the roof is missing. That concerns for the future how we can make that a better storm shelter. Like I said, you're not going to have an answer now, but in the future we should probably address that.
Yep, and that we were fortunate that the school was not in session.
Yeah.
Everybody was when this happened with everything. The good thing is, though, if it would have been at Wilkins that case, it would have been messy, but it would not have been necessarily unsafe for kids in that situation. But the water damage has been the biggest issue at Wilkins. Of anytime there's holes in those roofs, obviously that water just spreads, and that's been the challenge.
Okay, we can move on to our discussion of the school start date.
This kind of flows nicely based on our update I just gave you. Because of all the extensive and significant damage across the board to our district, but also our community, I think a delayed start is not only prudent right now, but I think it's honestly a necessity. It's something I think we have to really decide, not a matter of if we delay school, it's a matter of how long. Again, we're still going through the assessment of the damage stage, still trying to get some information there in a timely manner, and we get more and more information every day. And we were hopeful we'd see more power back on in our buildings today. We gained a couple buildings over the weekend. We're hoping to see more come online today. That has not happened consistently, so that's been a challenge. So what I would like to discuss tonight with the board is essentially two options. The first option is a 2-week delay to the start of the school year. And this is where I was on Friday when I communicated with you that I felt like a 2-week start was the right option. In a 2-week delay for a start, what that would look like is teachers would report back on August 25th instead of August 11th, and then students would start on Tuesday, September 8th, right after Labor Day. So we'd just be pushing everything back 2 weeks. It would not interfere with our initial return to learn plans, it just changed the date, so we'd have some things to look at there. But that would be the 2-week schedule to look at. As time has gone on this weekend, as we continue to monitor things, and I've talked to a few of you as well, I think we need to consider a 3-week delay as well. I think for a couple of reasons. One, the recovery is just so massive. I'm hesitant to think how quickly where we'll be at in a week or two, and I don't want to put ourselves in a spot where we're not feeling comfortable or safe. If we would go with the 3-week delay, that would essentially put teachers starting on Monday, August 31st, and they would have 2 or 9 days that we have planned as well to prepare for the start of the school year, and that would have students starting on Monday, September 14th. So those are kind of the two scenarios I'd like to discuss a little bit and get your feedback on thoughts as well. The advantage we have right now is we do have a board meeting next Monday night, so we could revisit it at that time as well. So we could start with a 2-week delay and then see where we're at, reassess our situation as power comes back on, and then make another decision, or we could make a decision tonight and not have to worry about that as well. So we've got a couple options on the table to consider. Thoughts you have on delay, questions you may have on the timing of everything there as well?
Well, Shannon, you were talking about the fluid piece of it. Now, let's say, for example, things move pretty well for us, and you decide to bring the teachers back next Monday, like you had said. Or
Tuesday, the day we have the teacher scheduled to
Tuesday.
come back. Yep.
bring them back on Tuesday and everything is go, and then you find out that week that, hey, we've got to delay this another couple weeks. That's not the end of the world either, is it? Or, you know, you're starting the teachers thinking we're going to be delayed 2 weeks, and then actually during that week you find out, oh, we're going to have to go 3, you know? Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. It would be ideal, but honestly, we're so far past ideal right now with everything going on that
Yeah.
that's not really one of our options.
Yeah, just ask.
So yeah, no,
Yeah.
that'd be something we could do.
Yeah.
Honestly, we've got to the point right now, like our community has, we'll make anything work where it is right now. It's just a matter of how often do we want to stop and start or make changes for everybody's schedule and planning purposes.
Well, and I
as
think
well.
there's probably, there's more pieces involved with the schools opening, the families and the parents getting electricity, the families and the parents having schools damaged. All of those pieces fit in there too. So if you try to force it in there, you don't want to do that either necessarily,
Yep.
right? Yeah.
That'd be our worst case scenario, I think, is trying to
Yeah.
force something in that we're not ready for, families aren't ready for right away.
I think there's so much chaos right now that if we can limit how much we change, I don't see how we can bring teachers back next Tuesday. I mean, a significant portion of Marion still has no power. All of our buildings are damaged. I don't see how we don't just say 3 weeks and then hope that that's what we get to do. And that next week, we're not saying, ooh, it needs to be 4. That's where I'm at, is I think it should be a minimum of 3 weeks to see where we're at. Like you said, 3 buildings, we don't have power, we have no idea what it's going to look like when we get in there.
I personally agree with the 3-week delay. Anybody else have some questions to ask or comments to make?
I think the 3 weeks would kind of give us a better idea to figure out what the federal response is going to be like.
Yes.
I think we're going to need, like our, you know, the families and the homes in our community are going to need federal response, but I'm not sure like what that will look like for supporting schools. Like obviously Cedar Rapids can't just shut down for 2 whole school years. We're going to need some sort of federal response. So maybe that would, there's some mechanism that will be activated that can help at like the 2 buildings or the few buildings that are really severely damaged. I just would hate to have us be in a position where we're like, oh, everybody can go back except this building, or it's like weirdly plasticed off. So I think we err on the side of 3 weeks. Because even if we looked at 2 weeks and revisited it next Monday, you're talking about people who would be planning on going to work the next day. So I think that's kind of tough also.
The thing about the 3 weeks that I see is that what's already been mentioned is it was so devastating, we still don't even have information coming from families as to how bad the destruction is. And, you know, like Kara said something about the federal government coming in there, and I know that Governor Reynolds is trying to rush that in there. But one of the things the 3-week gives us too is the family situation has an opportunity to calm down, assess, and try and move on the best they can. And maybe some of the anxiety that parents are feeling, the kids are feeling, and maybe that extra week is going to, it's not going to eliminate it, but I think it's going to help to some resolve the family unit to have that extra week, because it's not only our students, but our staff have the same problems with their homes and what's going on. So to me, I think it would be advantageous for us to go with the 3 weeks if Governor Reynolds will allow us to do that, simply because of what has happened. And I think it'd be beneficial to the students, to the staff, and to the patrons of our district. And I think that covers all of them as best we can. Everybody working together to try and get our kids into school. I think that would be the most advantageous approach.
Well, the nice thing is we don't have to ask Governor Reynolds for permission. That's up to us when we start our year. As long as it's before December 1st, we get to make that call. So
What matters is what happens with those 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Whether we have to make them up for tack them on or.
And that's something I have made a request to the Department of Education for some flexibility. I asked for flexibility in one of two ways or both options. One is flexibility in how we count hours and days in this situation. I don't know what the response to that will be. The other one is to potentially offer online learning as an option for us to start the year. Not that we'd want to, but I want to have that flexibility, that choice to do that. But to be honest, if our power and internet situation doesn't get any better, online learning is really not an option anyway. But just trying to have some flexibility and some options from the state in addition to the federal response, like you said as well, Kara, would be beneficial to know where we stand as well. So on the school calendar aspect, I did not bring you a calendar tonight. There's just too many moving pieces right now. Whatever we decide tonight, I will bring an updated calendar for Monday. But just so you're aware, we do have some extra days built into our calendar because at the time we approved the calendar, we did not have the authority. We still had to include snow days in that. We have since that time been given the authority to do snow days as online learning days as well for this school year. So those extra days we have built in, we in essence don't need. So that does give us a little bit of play with our calendar as well, instead of just tacking all the days at the end that we wouldn't be having right at the front too. So we'll tweak some of those things, come up with a revised version, which ones you'd be aware. It wouldn't necessarily have to be everything we miss at the front automatically gets added to the back end between the additional hours we have built into the calendar and then potentially some flexibility from the state. We're hoping to have a call tomorrow with the Department of Ed Director, Lebo, and see where we stand on that. So a lot of pieces still in the air to try to determine.
Tim, did you have something?
Yeah, well, thanks for mentioning. I was going to ask about online and the calendar. And then one other question was the lunch program. If we extend it out 3 weeks, what are we doing for like lunches? Are we able to do that? Are we partnering again with Fly or Marion Cares, or have we got a chance to? I know everything's moving so fluid. You got other, but I don't know.
Yeah, I have not reached out to Fly yet to see. That'd be something after night. Once we make that determination, we would reach out to them and see if they're able to extend their program.
Okay.
To be honest, I'm not even sure if they're offering it right now in this current situation where things are
They
at.
are.
So,
They are this week.
Mhm.
I think they were kind of waiting to hear what happens here.
Yep.
So.
I know Marion's having a similar conversation tonight, Independent School District is too. So there'll be some conversations we'd have there to see in that interim time period if they could help with that piece of it, because we would, without JT and having this conversation, I don't think we'd be able to offer that for school lunches before we started, but we have not had that in-depth conversation yet, but we could work with our community partners on that conversation too.
I would lean toward the 3 weeks too. I'd rather just, if we're going to go at least 3 weeks, let's just tell them plan out so they can plan for it.
Is this some, Shannon, it sounds like a majority of the group wants to go 3 weeks. Is this something that, it's something that we can't vote on, but it's just sharing our information with you, and then you're going to make that decision coming
Yep.
into next Monday? Is that what it is?
Honestly, I'll make that decision right now. I just wanted to run this past the board, and this is something that has been evolving. Like Tim said, it's been so fluid. One, just trying to assess our community health situation and then our school situation as well. And I communicated with you on Friday. I was feeling pretty good about 2 weeks. Optimistic the power would come back, optimistic on a few other things that we just haven't seen that happen. I'm not looking to blame anybody. It's just such a vast storm recovery. It's taking longer than we thought, and I think adjusting that accordingly. I don't think anybody in cabinet or our buildings are going to say we need to come faster than that. I think there's a lot of feeling of we need more time to prepare for that as well, as much as possible too. So I'm very comfortable with that, and I think as we continue to monitor that situation, we've got to be able to adapt and adjust our thinking as we proceed as well. And I think starting safe makes sense because there's a lot of moving pieces. We've got to have our buses ready to go. We got to have our schools ready to go. We need to make sure the sidewalks are safe for kids to be able to walk to school with all the branches and damages there as well. We've been in communication with the city about that, and they have a good plan too, but I know it's going to take a while.
And to try to get buses down the streets, that'll be another issue. So.
Yep.
We would vote on the calendar next week though, right?
Correct.
So that we would have a vote just for the actual calendar. I would also make sure that, because the city of Marion, I've seen them picking up things from curbs a lot faster than Cedar Rapids, and I know that it's a scale issue, but we should consider also the buses that have to go through Cedar Rapids. Like, you can't even see around corners in Bowman Woods. It's pretty risky, so.
Mhm.
Yep. The extra time we buy there should help on that recovery as well. Because we will start that communication as early as tonight and then tomorrow as well to make sure everybody's aware of that change. And I will bring you an updated calendar for board approval at our next Monday's board meeting, so we can make that official and final and go from there. And if we need to adjust it again, we will. Hopefully we won't, but the way it's going this year, we will truly take it one meeting at a time. So I appreciate the conversation and thoughts on this and your flexibility. Just as we've monitored this closely, it just continues to, it's just such a massive storm, and it's just taking long. It just makes sense that it's going to take longer to recover, so we need to adapt accordingly too.
Carol?
I did have one other thing, kind of about our community as a whole in the metro area, and I think that, you know, it's very obvious that districts are facing a variety of challenges, right? Like the damage out at College Community was pretty minimal, and it's all over, and so I would like to see, I think that as superintendents, you guys have all done a great job working together through COVID challenges. I would like to see some kind of like mutual support if we can. I know that it gets tricky with funding and everything, but if there's like anything that we can do, because when it comes down to it, it is about the kids. And I know that, you know, with other districts facing a lot bigger challenges, if there's anything we can do with like extending deadlines, if people wanted to move students, or however we can do it to support families in this time of need that need it. I would like to see that.
It's interesting you bring that up because we've had some really good conversations with the Metro superintendents about, obviously, the calendar changes and discussions about damage and how to try to be consistent with that, but yet everybody's in a little different spot. When I mentioned, I think we feel like we're pretty fortunate to our school status right now. I think Cedar Rapids is not as fortunate. Their damage has even been worse than ours, pretty significantly too. So we've had some conversation back and forth. Are there things that we can do to help them? Are there things they can do to help us? For example, our bus situation. The others don't seem to have as much damage to their transportation fleet that we do, so there's been some offers from their point of, well, if you need the buses or vans, maybe we can do some sharing there if we're not able to do certain things. And logistics of that, I don't know how that'll play out, but there's definitely some offers, and we're doing the same thing with some practice fields and different opportunities too to try to make that happen. I think we always work pretty well together, but I think even in this situation, we need to work even better together to try to meet the needs of each school and each student population as well. So it's going to take everybody working together to make this possible.
I guess I brought up a good point. I've heard about Cedar Rapids, but I haven't heard anything about Marion Independent.
Marion Independent's having a school board meeting right now to have a very similar conversation that we are about, I don't want to speak for them. I know they're looking at potentially a 2-week delay. I don't know if that's changed or not, but that's a similar conversation that we're having too. I think their damage is more focused in 1 or 2 buildings than it was all of them, which has some pros and some cons to that as they try to sort through what that looks like.
Anybody else? Yeah, I think you have your direction.
Yep.
I think we're solid on the 3-week.
Yep, we'll go with the 3-week delay. We'll get that information, updated dates, the general dates out to everybody ASAP. We'll come back with a more complete calendar to the board next Monday that we'll then share again. I feel like we've updated that calendar about 6 times already. I'm not sure what draft we're working on, unfortunately.
This is looking down the road quite a ways, but that's the first question folks are going to ask. They're not going to be against a delay, but what does it do to the rest of our school year? That'll be the biggest question. So
yeah, we'll need to review for the quarters. Where do the quarters fall? Where's the semester fall? Into the school year, obviously. Some of those other things we'll have to
Spring break.
adjust a little bit too. So there's several things we'll have to look at. So. Yep.
Next, we have a discussion about the return to learn plan. Superintendent Bisbard will direct that discussion.
You know, in the midst of all of this, we can't forget everything that's happening with COVID and return to learn. And I never ever thought we'd see something that would maybe take priority to it, but this last week has at least competed equally with it. So as we get ready for return to learn plans, in the last several weeks since our last board meeting, we've had a couple of key developments that's impacted our planning. I've talked to each of you about these as well. The biggest development we've had has been the significant increase in the number of families choosing the family choice online model for their students. On July 31st, we had 562 people selected that option at that time. As of today, we're almost to 1,700 students are now signed up for that option. So that's not a good or a bad thing, but it does have some logistical challenges for us as we try to prepare for that. So on the positive side, it really does help lower our student enrollment in classrooms and in buildings across the board. I shared some numbers with you a week or so ago. They've been updated a little bit more since then as well. For example, the elementary especially, we're looking at our largest elementary will be 347 students is all, and that's Echo Hill. They've been over 600 in the past, so that's a significant decrease. We're looking at Bowman Woods only having 228 students there this year, which was been up over 500 even a couple of years ago. Now keep in mind, we did lose one grade level from each of those buildings, so that's a portion of it. But you combine the loss of one grade level going to the intermediate buildings, plus the family choice option as well, that does give us some social distancing options. It really does give us some ways to spread things out in the buildings and help on that front. What it does create on the other side is a challenge to make sure we provide a quality education online for students as well, is how do we staff that? How do we run that? So just to give you a quick review for board members, elementary-wise, what we're looking at, and intermediate buildings, what we're looking at is pulling teachers to help teach strictly online, to help address the number of students that we have signed up for that model. So the Linn-Mar teachers doing that. So the way we're looking at doing that is trying to find staff in areas where we have extremely small numbers and looking at all of our staff available, as well as staff that may have some medical concerns that can't teach as well, and looking at those as our online teachers. So we've worked through that process and have a good plan there. So that still allows us to keep our class sizes very small. As of right now, and numbers are fluid, but we only have 2 classes across the entire district that are above 19. The rest of them are in that 18 or less stage for the most part. So we'll keep tweaking those as we go, but that's really had an impact on our staffing decisions. The biggest change, I'm sorry.
I just, did we extend the sign-up period at all, given everything that happened? And so will
Yep.
those numbers continue to change?
Good question. So yeah, we did extend the deadline for people to sign up. It was supposed to be last Tuesday. In light of everything that happened, that didn't seem fair. So we extended that. We're actually going to keep it open through the rest of this week.
Okay.
With a delay, we knew there'd be some extra time there as well. So we'll recommunicate that and give people time to process that as well. We want to get some information out, more details tonight too, so that will help
Are we
tonight
going
or
to give
tomorrow.
people an opportunity? There are people without power, there are people without internet, there are people with spotty cell service. Are we going to give some alternatives and for them signing up if they don't have access online? And are we going to communicate that to folks? You know, with registration, for instance, people had an option to come in to register, and that's changed for this year. But are we going to offer something similar for people to sign up for the virtual option?
It's a good question. We haven't talked specifically about that. Maybe Nathan and his team have, but we can definitely look at ways to try to give them the option to sign up, but also how do we communicate with them in non-electronic ways right now. I'm not sure what that looks like, but we could look at some options there to try to be as flexible as we can.
I mean, even if we have to send a letter out, I know that's tough, and if the deadline has to be extended to permit for that, but I don't want anybody to say that, well, because of the storm, we weren't able to sign up and when we would have liked to.
Yep.
I think a letter is a really good idea. I mean, I know mail's delayed.
I was going to say Postal
But-
Service that has its
Right.
own challenges right
That's
now.
why I say you might have to extend the deadline, you know what I mean, past this week. I think you have some room to do that, given the 3-week delay to the start of the school year. And it may not change your numbers much anyway. I mean, I imagine at this point, most people who wanted to sign up for the virtual option have done so at this point. But again, I don't want anybody to feel like they didn't have the opportunity to make the decision that they wanted to for their student.
Well, I think the letter should even include the 3-week delay, because people without power, people who aren't on social media, who can't check email, I still can't check my email. I can see you're emailing me, I can't respond
Right.
to anyone. So, I mean, there are people that won't even be able to read an email that we send out. So I think just a letter maybe going out tomorrow summarizing the changes for the year, the extended deadline would be helpful.
Is it possible to have, if we are able to do a mass mailing, like I assume you use a vendor to do it, I guess I don't really know, but with services down in the district, but, is it possible to say like, have it be like a week or a week and a half or whatever you're saying, and say like, if due to circumstances beyond your control, you missed the deadline, please call us at whatever. So then you're still encouraging people to meet the deadline, that can meet the deadline, and if there are extenuating circumstances, people feel comfortable knowing that we'll support them.
I agree. No, I absolutely agree.
I like that.
I absolutely
We can
agree.
definitely do some things to, one, communicate, because we're going to have to communicate differently than we normally do with everything. I honestly don't know if we could even get 7,600 letters out in a
Well, maybe
timely
you
manner
could
right
figure
now.
out
Well, that's
what
something we can look at
areas-
ways to do that, to try to communicate in other non-electronic
There are certain
formats
schools
too.
whose neighborhoods are still without power. I mean, I think that would be
Where you
fairly,
start.
yeah, where you start.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Indian Creek has a lot of people that, still don't have power. Wilkins have a lot of people. So kind of, maybe you focus on those schools that have large populations of people who are still without power, internet, et cetera.
Yeah, 'cause there are a lot of changes taking place, so the more we can do to share that information with everybody will obviously be beneficial as well. So that's why we extended the deadline, thinking, knew we look at a later start to the school year, we've got more time, so that isn't quite the rush as well. And it gives people a chance to process everything that's happening around them right now too. So,
And I agree with all of this, and it could go both ways. Some people could backtrack a little bit, saying, wait a minute, we can't do this at home now, so we're gonna have to regroup.
That's
So
a
it could
good
go
point,
both
Barry.
ways. Yeah.
Very good
Yeah.
point.
Yep,
Yeah.
hadn't thought about that, but that very easily could be the result now that everybody's home situation looks a little bit different than it did 8 days ago, so that may.
I mean, we never thought you'd ever have a communication issue with all of our technology today, and look at what you just brought up. It's kind of amazing, so, yeah.
Well, and I think flexibility is the key here, to try to look at all of our opportunities and ways to get the information out, and I'm sure that Shannon and the team will do that, so, very good. Any other suggestions about that?
The other piece we haven't gotten to yet is, the online portion of it for the middle school, high school. And that does look different at the two middle schools, not our intermediate buildings, but our two middle schools, Excelsior and Oak Ridge, and the high school, just because of the way their day is structured, their schedules, their courses, their credits, those pieces, it just looks different for that online piece. We can't just pull a teacher to teach a certain number of kids because of licensure challenges and course specifics and everything else that way too. So what we have been looking at, as you're aware of, is having the high school teachers essentially teaching in a dual platform world where they have some kids in their classroom and some kids online at the same time. We're now looking to do that same thing with 7th and 8th grade students as well. But we think to do that, we need to offer that hybrid model for the first quarter of the year as well, to have teachers have a more manageable number in that classroom during that day as well. So that'd be the one change I would suggest to our return to learn plan, is to extend the 7th, 8th grade portion of the hybrid beyond that soft start part to more of the true quarter like we are at the high school piece. That would be the only change. Everything else in the component, the plan would stay exactly the same. Mask requirements, social distancing, cleaning procedures, all those things would stay exactly the same as we've talked about earlier. So that'd be the one,
Just
the
to
one
clarify.
significant change there.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you.
Yep.
But the 7th and 8th graders will be the soft start, or the hybrid meaning for the whole quarter.
Correct.
Every other day. Yeah, okay.
Yep, and now that first quarter end date was October 23rd. That'll be different now because of our later start, so we'll update that as well. Yep, but still be the first quarter. Yep.
Question?
I have a couple of things. I don't know if you have seen, KCRG has a report out that the reporting of COVID cases may not have been accurate due to some data errors. I don't know what that's, like what that will materialize into or not for that matter, but I just want to bring it up so that it's on our radar.
I saw that
I don't-
as well.
Yeah.
I don't-
And it
Saw
says
that.
that it's, the glitch is reporting them lower
Yeah.
than they actually are.
Yeah,
And at what they're actually reporting right now, we're at 9% in Linn County, which, and I think that was as of August 13th. Linn County is at a 9% positivity rate.
is that the number they're reporting, or is that the accurate number?
That's the number they're reporting, not the accurate
Right,
number.
right,
So-
okay.
So the recommendations have been ignoring the 15%. I don't want to talk about that one yet. But the WHO and the CDC are saying between 5 and 10%. The Surgeon General says we should not reopen unless we're less than 10%. And we're at 9% right now, and the numbers are not accurate. So I'm concerned with that. That's something I think we should be paying attention to over the next couple of weeks. I also have some questions about the elementary. Have we figured out specials yet? And what social distancing and those rooms look like? Because until, a week ago, I was still getting a lot of emails, and then they've started coming in again with those questions when we announced this meeting tonight about every kid circling through art class and music class and gym, rather than having them zoomed into their classrooms, not keeping the kids in the classrooms. There's a lot of concern about that from both teachers and parents. So do we have that figured out?
We do not. And the main part of that is we want teachers to be part of that discussion and solution. And since we keep having teachers not show up because of our weather challenges,
Okay.
that conversation is still looming to have out there. But that doesn't mean it's not a conversation that's not going to happen. It is. It's just we need to get the teachers back on that conversation piece to work that part through.
Some
As far as
concern-
your numbers go, I checked this morning, it was about 8.6, I think was the number for Linn County as of today. That's not any different than what you quoted with it, essentially, because that metric is such a interesting metric, I'll just say, to use for our criteria for that piece. It will be interesting to see how much those numbers are skewed based on this. I don't know if it'll be a significant jump or if it's going to be fractions. We'll have to see on that piece to see, but that was definitely interesting to see that article come out today on what that impact will be, because technically, under the governor's guidance, we're not even able to request something different than the less than 50% hybrid until we get to 15% or more as well. Not doesn't mean we can't, but they're basically saying that's not an option they will even consider until that takes place. So I don't know if this will change that conversation or not, but
So, go ahead.
I brought it up just because I think it's something that we should all have on our radar, just, you know what I mean? We don't know. I don't think that changes our plans at the moment, but definitely something that we should, you know what I mean, be kind of looking out for, you know what I mean? Keep tabs on it. And the other thing that I have is just a mask thing, and I just want to read really quick. Somebody sent this to me. You know, I felt like, you know, our meeting, last meeting, or the one before, I don't know, they're all running together at this point, we had discussed masks, and, you know, I think most of the board felt that we needed to be unequivocal about that, and somebody had sent to me a letter that they had received from the district, and one of the things it says is, classrooms are being arranged to allow for distancing as much as possible. When it is not possible to be 6 feet apart, students will be wearing masks. That is concerning to me. I think whether they are 2 feet or 10 feet apart, they need to be wearing masks. You know, the one thing that we have in our tool belt against COVID, and the one thing that I feel like allows us to say, or at least for me to say, I'm comfortable sending kids back into the classroom, is mask. You know, it's the one thing we've got. And I think, again, our communication about that has been very confusing, and
That definitely is different than the impression that I was under. And I
Right.
actually had talked to somebody at the high school, because Tim and I had talked about that. Like, when the kids are in the classroom, if they're 6 feet apart, does that mean they can take their masks off? And I was told, no. Masks on in the building, period. But I hadn't got
Yeah.
any communication that read like that at all.
I just, you know, again, if we aren't very clear, we need it makes me concerned that we don't have a clear plan about masks, that there may be people within the district in leadership positions who don't understand the plan. But then also, our communication piece of that, like, are we effectively conveying what the plan is? If the plan, which was my understanding during our last meeting, was that they're gonna be wearing masks. I expect them to go into the cafeteria and have their mask on, and they wear it when they're going through the line, and they don't take it off until they sit down and start eating. Those things have to be clear, and everybody needs to be on the same page, and it doesn't feel like they are. And I think on this, this is kind of the one thing that I'm coming down hard on, to say, like, there is no room for confusion, or no room for people to have like different opinions on this, or one building to be doing something and another building to be doing another. It needs to be a very clear across the district policy, and then it needs to be communicated very clearly to parents so that they know and they're on the same page about what the policy is. Sounds good.
Yep. No, and I think what's part of that challenge is our stance on masks has gotten stricter and tighter since I don't know, 2-3 months ago, whenever that was. So whether that's an older document or if it's not a document we just need to update ourselves, that's something we can fix and will, because it's not a philosophy difference. Yeah, we agree, and it needs to be tight with that piece of it too. We just need to get the communication parts updated, it looks like, to make sure that message is crystal clear. I don't have any disagreement with what you're saying there, and we'll get that fixed. That's not the intent.
I know that there will be some people for whom the mask issue is contentious, and if we are to enforce it, you know what I mean? I don't want somebody to come back and say, well, this said, you know what I mean, that here my child doesn't have to wear a mask. It's just too important. It's just too important. It does come down to the health of the kids, and
Well, I want to piggyback off of what Rachel's saying, is that not just do they have to be worn, they have to be worn properly. Because, you go out now and kids are wearing them on their chins, or they slide down under their nose, or they need to be properly fitted masks. This isn't something you have one on your body, so that counts.
right. There's also been some updates from the CDC in terms of masks with vents are not recommended. I think those need to be kind of off the table, because those vents protect the person wearing it from stuff out here, but it doesn't protect the people out here from the person wearing the mask. So I think that needs to be updated, and there were some other ones about masks versus other cloth coverings.
The really thin gaiters.
Yep.
Like, maybe there's information out there about like the candle test, and maybe like just kind of like infographics that we can communicate,
Right.
like, this is what's effective and this is how and why it works.
And this is what we will require. You know what I mean? This is what it means when we say we want you to wear a mask. And I also think there needs to be a clear communication about what will happen if those rules are not followed. Because once again, if there is,
They have to be the same for all.
it has to be the same for all, but also people need to understand, if you don't wear a mask to school, you're gonna be sent home, or, you know what I mean, whatever that is. And I'm not sure that we've discussed that as a board, but I will say, for me, if you're not wearing a mask, you have to go. That's, where I stand on it. I think it would be important to get a consensus about that.
We've talked about that quite a bit with administrators on that angle, and that just becomes, the only challenge becomes to have a set rule across the board, is that looks very different for a kindergartner versus, say, 11th grader, whether we're choosing to wear a mask, or how much that educational perspective do you need to take with 11th grader versus a kindergartner, and the expectation in the end is the same, but the approach to that has to be different on that part as well. And then it gets into some of the individual pieces, because there will be some medical situations where we have to
absolutely.
recognize as well too.
Absolutely,
So,
and I would
that's
fully
why it's hard to
expect-
have a hard, fast, you have to do it, you have to go home situation right away. So, but
I
the
think-
standard will be set very high, that it has to be a mask. That's, like we said from day one, we don't want to just start school eventually here, we want to stay in school once we get going, and that's the best way we can do that is consistent mask enforcement and social distancing. So,
I think there's a difference between, small children who are struggling with keeping them on versus they didn't bring them to school. You know what I mean? They've come to school with no mask. I have
We'll
no
have extras.
problem saying that, that's something that parents need to make sure their kids have, and if they don't, they can't be in school. I mean, we are gonna have, some issues with getting small kids to, it's going to be a learning curve, but I would just caution that, of course, there are exceptions to the rule. There are children with medical conditions that will need accommodations, but, I mean, those are things that, parents can contact teachers. Those can be accommodated without being, opening the door for people without those issues to not wear masks. Because if they're not wearing masks, then why are they there? If they're not wearing masks, we should send everybody home because they're not protected. Other people are not protected. We're going to be putting people at risk, and I'm not comfortable with that. And I don't know. There's just a little part of me that feels some anxiety about this because I think there's a reluctance to really come down hard. And I think on this, we got to come down hard.
Okay.
Are you planning to allow for face shields
So,
in place of masks?
honestly, the board conversation for board meetings is for the board, so I don't want to be rude, but I can be glad to talk about afterwards on that, so.
Well, the uniformity is a key issue because you get into some of the upperclassmen and stuff like that. Well, we did this in Algebra 2 and we could take them off, but we went to physics and we had to put them all on. And then you get conflicts between teachers and you get that game going, and that's something from elementary to middle school to high school that you don't want to get started because it has a tendency to snowball and get out of control, and then you got faculty against faculty sometimes, or students, and the kids know how to play the game. Hey, didn't have to here, now I have to here. What's the deal? I think uniformity in that and coming up with the best. Obviously, there's going to be parameters where there's going to be special situations. Yeah, you have to deal with that, and you have to, explain that to the teachers, explain it to the students even, saying, hey, this is a special situation that we have here. That's why we're doing it this way. Everybody else, boom.
Yep.
Because
I don't disagree with anything we're saying. I completely
The whole
agree.
thing is
Well, I think-
safety of students and staff.
Yeah, and these comments are very well taken, but we've got to put our respect into our leadership of our schools. We've got to put our respect into our teachers. It's not going to be an easy task. I agree with you 100%, and there's going to be a lot of one-offs, and it's going to be a challenge. I mean, it's not going to be easy, but I don't know if we can solve that as a board. We can be as strong as we want to be, but I think in the long run, it's still going to have to be from the top
Well, with
down.
all due respect to the leadership, you have communications going out that suggest that if you're, 6 feet apart, you don't have to wear a mask. So, when I personally tried to make it a point that we be very clear about that, and then there's a communication that makes that kind of murky again, like, no, absolutely, this needs to be brought up, at the board level, because people are watching this, and then they are communicating that out to people, and
I think going forward, we know that that's what we want, and I think that Shannon's talked about making sure everyone is.
Yeah, if we made that
gets
mistake, send that out, we'll
reinforcement.
fix that. I don't have a problem with that. That was never the intent of it either. But please don't hesitate. If you see something like that come out, just let me know. We're not trying to be confrontational on this. We
No,
are
I
committed to
don't-
the safety
I
piece
don't
as
think that at
well.
all. No, I
That's-
don't think,
I'm agreeing with you 100%.
I don't think that it was intentional at all.
It's
But
good to know, though.
But it's
Yeah.
concerning.
There's confusion,
Yeah.
and we
And
can
so
clear
then
that up.
we
And I
need to-
think that Barry's right, it is going to come down to the teachers, which is why if we make it very clear what the teachers need to enforce, it makes it easier on the teachers to do that.
And we
So-
have, yes.
So I
yes.
think
I think-
we set the standard, and it makes it easier for teachers to enforce it.
And I think that's clear where we want
Yeah.
to be.
As a-
I
as a-
do
as a-
have a similar question
I'm sorry,
about.
As a group, it's pretty uniform here, you know, the
Yep.
7 of us agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Uh, What is our district policy on face shields? Because I have had that question asked, and I don't know.
Yeah, it's either a mask and a shield, or it's a mask.
Okay.
So the shield by itself
Good.
is not an option.
Okay, because I've had that question as well, and so I had it written down here, now I can check it off, so.
Yep.
Should we go forward from there? Is there something else you'd like to share?
As far as I'm concerned, yep. Unless
Okay.
others have questions.
I have a couple more.
Anyone else?
Yep, I have a couple more. I talked about it last time, and I'm going to bring it up again, that I think that we should be hybrid across all levels. Got some concerns from staff members at the elementary level trying to set up their classrooms since they've come back. Had several reports of they can put 9 desks in their classroom with 6 feet. And we're averaging 18 is great, but that means that they're less than 6 feet apart. Even at 3 feet, that's going to be tough. And I've been in those elementary classrooms. I don't think that that's good enough.
Okay.
I think that we should be doing hybrid PK through 12 for the first quarter. I think that's going to give us the best chance of keeping kids in school 2 days a week, 3 days a week, every week for longer. What Indianola lasted 4 days, and they had to send first graders home after 4 days. We're watching schools go back to school across the country, and they're lasting a week. Teachers have a back-to-school breakfast, and then 50 out of the 100 test positive. How are we going to stay open? And that plays into the equity question as well. Isn't it more beneficial for students who need to be in the classroom to know that they're going to be in the classroom 2 days this week and 3 days next week, and that potentially that's going to keep them there longer than coming back 5 days a week right away and then having to shut down after a couple weeks because we've got too many people in the building at one time?
Okay, we'll move on from there. Anyone else wants to comment about that or something else? Tim?
I guess I agree. I'd like to see kind of uniformity across the district where we go for first quarter with the on-off, the hybrid model. I think it would, to her points as well, but I think it would be uniformity across the district, which I think would be good. So we already have 7 through 12 doing that, or will. So.
Okay. Other comments or questions? Anybody else have something to say? Okay, is there any more you would like to share about the plan?
Nope, I think we've covered it
Okay.
at last board meeting and this one as well.
Okay. So, we feel ready to vote? Everyone comfortable?
I move to approve the 2021 Return to Learn plan as discussed.
Second.
Okay.
So what's as discussed? Because we discussed
Yeah,
two
we
different
just-
options.
K through 6 for 2 weeks, and then 7 through 12 for the first quarter.
Would you agree with that, Shannon? That was what you were proposing?
Yes, that was the initial proposal, yep.
Everybody heard the proposal? You good? Okay, so we need to have a roll call, please.
We actually don't need to have a roll call on this one, so
That's
it'll
what
be
it
not
says here.
needed.
So, okay, that's fine. Then we'll just go. All those in favor of the Return to Learn plan as presented by Superintendent Bisgard, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay. Believe it passed. Okay. Move on to the next. Need a motion for the open enrollment request.
I make a motion to approve the open enrollment request as presented. Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Not-
Oh,
Go ahead.
No, never mind, I'm getting ahead of myself. I was
Okay.
going to ask on the consent agenda.
Okay. Any other about open enrollment? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, carries. Next, we need the consent agenda
Make a
motion.
motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
Any discussion?
Question would be, you mentioned about additional staff or reallocating staff, do you think that would be, I don't think you'll get it done in 1 week. Are you talking like in a couple weeks, you come back, at least on the board level, come back, is that what you're thinking?
Oh, for different assignments?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that'll be for next Monday's agenda. In fact, I doubt it, but the following board meeting, there will be some adjusted
Okay.
staff assignments on there, correct?
There are two questions that I have. There are 2 coaches for the 7th and 8th grade level. Are those going to be removed from there since we're not having that sport, or the volleyball coach along with the football coach?
Good question.
It just surfaced in the last few minutes as I was glancing at it, so, yeah.
Yep, we'd
Yeah,
have to go
those
back and
are just
revisit those
keep
2,
changing.
so, yep.
All that keeps changing.
So I guess, do we have to remove those?
As I said, the easier way to do it, we can either make the motion with those revisions included, or we can go back to it again next week to fix it, but it might be easier to just do it right now.
I would say whoever made the motion, go ahead and remake it with those 2 removed, don't you think? That'd
Which
be
are the
easiest
2
on-
that need to be removed here?
It'd be 7th grade volleyball and 8th grade football, is that correct, Carla, as you're looking at it?
Ready?
Seventh grade.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the omission of the co-extracurricular assignment, reassignment, transfer with regard to the 7th grade volleyball coach at Excelsior and the head 8th grade football coach at Oak Ridge.
Is there a second to that? Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'd like to congratulate Diane Kramer on her retirement.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Board calendar.
We're to communications,
Communications,
right?
yep.
Yes, okay. Does anyone have a communication that they would like to share? Anything for the good of the order? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Board calendar, I noticed on here that we have a board visit September 10th, and I'm thinking that that probably won't happen.
I'm
Is
thinking
school wanting to
probably
be in
not.
session then?
Yeah,
Unless
I'm
we're gonna
kind of
be a work
thinking.
session.
Yeah, I know.
We
So.
will have to update several calendar
Yeah,
items
so
after
we
tonight's
maybe
meeting.
need to take some of those toward the beginning of the year and filter them in toward the end, hoping that we'll be more back
Yep.
and ready to be able to do that, would be my suggestion, to make it
We
a
can
little
do
bit
that.
easier. Okay, anything else?
Do we know if city council is happening in person yet?
They're still virtual.
They're still virtual?
Yeah, Tim, you did yours. Next time we'll have an update, I think, on that.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
So,
Is it still virtual?
It's still virtual.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So we're just having a regular meeting next week, not a work session? Just to
Yep.
clarify?
Yep.
Good.
Are we good with all that? Any other questions, communications for the calendar, any of that? Okay, so,
Move to adjourn?
not seeing any more? Yes, thank you.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Thank you.